As a mechanical movement, triggering is very simple. This is just moving trigger blade a couple of millimeters with the index finger with a maximum force of about 1 kilogram. The triggering movement should be separated from the muscles involved in gripping and aiming. The hand holds the gun and only index finger pulls the trigger. All the joints of the index finger should be in balanced antagonist muscle position. In general, it feels like relaxed position. The index finger in this position should just slightly touch the trigger blade. It is how we should choose the correct position of the trigger blade. The relaxed finger lightly touches the trigger. In this position, the movement of the index finger will be the easiest and most controlled. The shooter can get information related to the trigger control from two sources: from the muscles flex the finger and from the tactile receptors of the skin of the last phalanx. Both sources are important, but try to pay attention to the feeling of muscles. The feeling of movement in statically held hand should not be lost. So the index finger should be as relaxed as possible, but without affecting the hand holding the gun. From the other side, the tension of the static holding muscles of the hand should not spread to the triggering finger. So its relative relaxation should be under control. Trigger pulling should be directed exactly backward, using the 3 joints of the triggering finger makes this easy to do. As you can see, compliance with these requirements is not a problem for a healthy person. Difficulties with triggering are mostly in the relationship between triggering and other elements of the shooting technique and their mutual coordination. The first task in developing proper trigger control for every shooter is to find his or her own triggering style. So how can shooter find it and why it is so important? The main particularity of the technique of beginners, and this has been proven by research, is that stability of the aiming pistol becomes worse as the trigger begins to be pulled. The movements of the hand with pistol increase as the trigger finger starts to move toward the trigger point. Schematically, it looks like this. Of course, the error is not always so rough and may not appear on every shot. It is a common beginner's technique tendency that reduces the chances of successful shot. However, it exists, and the shooter must learn how to pull the trigger without increase the movements of aiming gun, without the slightest increase in those movements. The ability to do this is the first indication of how far this particular athlete has progressed comparing to a beginner. The result of this search is different for each shooter, and we will call it individual triggering style. Finding the correct individual triggering style is a time-consuming task. The shooter can consider this task accomplished if the stability of aiming gun does not worsen before shot, like this. Triggering is not the only element of shooting technique. The athlete's attention is also required for sight alignment, gripping, etc. Triggering can easily draw attention. It is a movement among static efforts, and this is important movement. So be careful. It is very easy for attention to escape into a triggering. To make it easier to find the right style of triggering, this element should take up as little attention as possible. Take it as a rule. The athlete should pay as little attention as possible to the triggering. Much of attention is consumed by other elements. So just start moving your finger and feel it constantly moving in the right direction until the pistol fires. Sometimes it's good to get rid of that responsibility. It's the pistol that shoots, not the shooter. In order to practice effectively and continually improve skills, it is important to create understanding of how good shot should be performed. The athlete should understand what he or she is trying to create with the training efforts. The first element of the mental model of a good shot is visual sighting. It is quick and easy to understand what the shooter should see when shooting. The next step, stabilization of position of front sight in rear sight, separation of the triggering movement from the other muscles of the hand, and identification of individual triggering style. These tasks should be harmoniously combined into single model. It should be basic of the shooting technique development. This is the axis of the future technique. We do not practice smart triggering. We are not trying to finish pulling when the aiming is accurate. We are trying to create period of good, stable aiming that long to finish triggering without hurry in chosen style. If shooter's skills are not sufficient to perform all the elements of technique the way he or she wants, shooter should try to perform well those elements that he is good at and patiently work on developing the others. This is the shortest way to achieve the desired goals. The first advice on the pistol shooting sounds approximately like that. Look at the front sight, align it with the rear sight, and in the same time smoothly and slowly pull the trigger, paying no attention to the slight movements of the pistol on the target. Pull it so slowly that shot will come unexpectedly to you. That's good advice. Beginner cannot follow anything else. However, with regular practice, it is hard to keep every shot unexpected. How many times you can trip on a dark staircase in your house? A limited number of times, of course. Over time, the shot stops to be a surprise. So we need to find something else that would be as effective in technique as a surprise shot. To develop a psychological approach to the technique, which includes a special self-tuning, perhaps with some disregard for the result of the shot. What can you do? Psychological difficulties must be solved with psychological methods. Also, practicing regularly, it becomes more and more difficult to pay no attention for the pistol movements. With training, the aiming becomes steadier and the gun even sometimes stops in the sighting area. It is tempting to accelerate the pulling while the pistol is standing still. So the following question raises. Is accelerating the trigger pull for the sake of center hit an acceptable mistake? Let's call the technique of carefully following the classic advice not to wait for a good aim to complete the triggering and not chase the center of the target, unconscious shooting. And the technique of accelerating the triggering when the aim is favorable, conscious shooting. Commonly recommended technique is unconscious shooting. Let's have a look what are the advantages of this technique. The most commonly cited reasons are the human reaction speed to favorable aiming is insufficient to ensure reliable scoring of 10. And the psychological pressure of the conscious technique is too strong for competitive performance. This is true and understandable. But I would like to add something else. Conscious technique violates the rule of minimum attention to triggering. This increases the number of rough shooting errors. By chasing the center of the target, the shooter increases the number of central hits, but at the same time increases the number of hits far from the center. For example, two athletes are practicing. One athlete scores 94 points with 3 8 and 7 10s. Another one also scores 94 points with 4 10s and 6 9s. I would dare to say that the first athlete works more consciously than the second one. If the first one tries to use the same technique in competition, the number of 8s will be probably increase and the number of 10s will decrease. The technique of the second athlete is more applicable to competition pressure. The unconscious technique always wins on averages. Another reason, every shooter should have an idea of a good technique that should be practiced and that will bring the future success. It is very important for successful improvement. Clearly understand what are you going to achieve with training. Before you lift the pistol for the next shot, you have to be clear about what are you going to do. There should be no conditions associated with random chance. Nothing like, if it coincides like that, I am going to do this. Conscious shooting depends a lot on opportunity and chance, but idea of good shot should not be unclear. Lack of clear understanding of how good shot should be done is serious obstacle to mastery of shooting skills. And if I haven't convinced you yet, I will try to put it into practical terms. So, If you sometimes shoot like this, conscious technique is not for you. Sometimes signs of conscious shooting can be seen in the performance of high-level athletes. But I did not say that good shooters never shoot consciously. There are different competition situations and risky decisions can be implemented. However, the shooter should realize that this is mostly a lucky chance and cannot be used as a primary technique. It is still an error. The stability of pistol when aiming is very important. To shoot at 10 with confidence, the shooter must aim at the 10 with confidence. This is common sense. The efforts of shooters to stabilize the pistol and aim accurately are, figuratively speaking, like diligently saving up money to buy something what they want. And triggering is spending the money you have raised. That's it. No magic. You buy what you have money for. And trigger problems remind me of trembling in hands and other heartaches when a person gives away to someone his hard-earned funds. For many people, this is a psychologically difficult moment. The first thing you need to learn when developing your trigger technique is to buy what you have money for. All your efforts to be smart and buy something cheaper than it should cost will do nothing good. How to evaluate available resources? How to assess stability of aiming pistol? The visual sighting is an indicator of the aiming stability. However, it should be learned how to read it correctly. It is important to give a correct evaluation, to give call of each shot and search for the reason why the call does not match the actual hit. The electronic simulators are very effective for the correct evaluation of aiming. It provides immediate and accurate information about pointing the pistol at the target. But we cannot get such information during competition. However, the condition of the athlete significantly affects his perception of sights movements. In state of stress, the pistol movement seems larger and more frequent to the athlete than they really are. Of course, severe stress can disturb stability of aiming, but very often the disturbance is seemingly apparent. There is a physiological reason for this. In excited state, and competition are nervous activity, the reaction heightens and the shooter sees those movements which he or she did not see in calm state. He simply begins to see what he could not see before. It seems to him that the stability of the gun deteriorates. Although, in a great measure, this is a result of condition changes. Just he perceives the same movements more pessimistically. One example is a situation familiar to many experienced shooters. The beginning of qualification is always exciting. It is recognized tense period of competition. And when the first series or two have been successfully, but with difficulties passed, the excitement has subsided and the stability of aiming visually has improved, nines occur more often. The reason for this is change in the state of the athlete, the transition of the nervous system from sympathetic to parasympathetic. Adrenaline and other stress hormones decreases, and with them the reaction decreases. So the shooter simply stopped noticing those movements of the sight, which 10 shots earlier seemed significant to him. The seeming improvement of aiming put the alertness to sleep. Trouble came when it was least expected. How do you know if it is really a loss of aiming stability or just a seeming loss? Don't think about it. Take into account that some worsening is just illusion caused by excited state and continue to work as usual. This is the best that can be done in this case. We perform well the elements of technique which we can perform well and hope that the rest will be close to perfection soon. The most of troubles with triggering have psychological nature, and psychological problems need psychological solutions. You have to realize that the triggering movement itself is not difficult. Do you want to feel the perfect trigger pull? You can do it anytime. Raise the gun, close your eyes, and simulate the shot. Your finger will work perfectly. Why does it happen? Because all the indicators that connect the triggering to the predicted result of your action are switched off. And if you can not succeed in triggering with your eyes open, those indicators should be little neglected. The most effective technique of shooting is to perform two simultaneous independent actions. One of them is aiming, and the other one is pulling the trigger. It is not easy to perform them independently of each other. But remember the effectiveness of this technique when you have issues with triggering. If you agree with what I have said, follow it logically, and it will help you overcome the challenges you may face. For example, a few tips that follow the above. If you see that your aiming is accurate and stable, but you have not yet started triggering, you are late. It should be started before the desired aiming conditions appear. Now it is the best to put the pistol down and do it right next time. And don't try to shoot perfectly. Striving for perfection provokes many errors. Long aiming, chasing the center of target, accelerating the trigger, etc. To shoot good is enough. Leave perfect shooting for future.